Greg Schmitt, how you doing today?
Blessed and highly favored. How about yourself?
I am living the dream. It is so great to have you here on Contractor Stories. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to dive into your story. Everybody who comes onto the program is in home service. They're, in the contracting business. You're in the handyman business. I talk to people in roofing and HVAC, electrical, plumbing. Everyone has a unique story as to how they got into the business, where they came from, and what they're trying to achieve. So I understand that you started your business in San Diego during a really rough time during COVID. Is that correct?
That is correct. Even 10 years ago, I didn't even know how to use a screw gun.
Now, there's a story. So, what prompted you during COVID to obviously switch gears and go from what you were doing to getting into the home service world with handyman work? What were you doing?
Well, I was kind of forced to do it, honestly. I was building these large event sets for brands. They call it experiential marketing. Like you might go to a sporting event, like I worked the Super Bowl, the Final Four, and they have these experiences that you like build, and then people walk through and get free stuff from. And so I would build those. But then COVID obviously shut all that down. So I wasn't really sure what to do. I was actually driving for Instacart just to, kind of get by and figure out what the next move was. And I had a friend of mine ask me, "Hey, do you know a handyman?" And it never occurred to me to ever pursue that. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's basically what I was doing. Like, yeah, I mean, I can help you out. And so it started with him and, working, doing like word of mouth. He would recommend me to somebody. And then, we got kind of hooked up with some different like digital marketing platforms and it kind of escalated from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. The handyman business is a great entry, I believe, into home service. Generally, you don't have to be as technical as HVAC, electrical, plumbing, irrigation, pest control. Um, you don't have to have the same permits and licenses and so forth. It's a simpler way to get in. Also, it's very wide. So you might be painting someone's bathroom on Monday, and then Tuesday installing a ceiling fan somewhere else, right?
That's correct. And I was always amazed too, because, I would go into these homes and they like me, but, I just have a drill bag and some basic hand tools. I'm putting together IKEA furniture. And then people were asking me, like, "Hey, do you remodel bathrooms?"
Uh-huh.
I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. So I've been working for or with home service professionals for 20 years. And I had mentioned this to you off air, and it's just so common in the handyman space. People buy people. So when you're in the home painting someone's baseboards, they get to know you and like you and they trust you. And they're like, "Can you tile the floor? Can you put the ceiling fan in? Can you fix my roof? Can you install a swimming pool?" Little extreme, but they
Yeah,
hope you can, right? "Can you clean my carpets?" Because they don't want to hire someone they don't know. They want you and hope you can do everything.
that's true. And, there's a balance there that you have to know if it's just you working by yourself, you need to know your limits. And, when early on, I would never touch plumbing other than like a faucet, but after a period of time, we started bringing other technicians on. You can kind of expand your reach a little bit. But yeah, you do have to be careful because you don't want to mess up someone's house, like, and ruin that relationship. You want to make sure that you're always doing A+ work.
In San Diego and or California, what are the limitations, the barriers to entry for what you do in terms of insurance and licensing?
So it's actually, the barriers to entry are high because the minimum the before you need to get a license, the limit is $500 including materials. So it's actually, I feel, a little unreasonable for people to get started. Like if you were to go by the letter of the law, you would, only be able to do like a day job, and they would have to buy the materials. It's not like a very good experience,
Hmm.
for people. They don't want to have to, if they hire you, they want you to take care of all of it. So I definitely did not stay within that when we first started out. But you just, like I said, you have to know your limits. It's not like there's going to be a licensed person around the corner. Like the CSLB isn't going to be there being like, hey, this 2 day, you did a 2 day job, like you're going to jail. But you have to know like what are safe jobs and what aren't safe jobs, and you really need to get a license if you want to be a player. Is really the thing. I had a mentor. I was talking to him, and he was helping me kind of like develop my business. And he had a story where basically he got in a kind of a conflict with the customer, and he was like, the customer wasn't going to pay him, and he was like, "That's really unprofessional. You're not going to pay me." And the guy was like, "It's really unprofessional. You're doing all this work without a license." And he was like, "You're right." And
Yeah.
so he went and got his license, and once he told me that story, I realized that was the path. And so getting a license was the number one priority to really succeed in the business.
Yeah. So here in Texas, where I am, outside of Houston, you may or may not know this, no licenses or insurance of any type required to be a handyman. Isn't that
That's
incredible?
crazy. That's
Okay.
that's incredible.
I'll tell you something
But
crazier. No requirements for roofers, landscapers, pool builders. You could be a pool builder and not have, there are no licenses required. There's no license to get. In Texas, you can get a DBA, doing business as, but if you're an electrician, you need to be licensed and insured. Plumbers, yes, there's about 6 different ones: pest control, irrigation, plumbing, HVAC, and so forth. But you can be a handyman. Um, you could, I mean, you can walk out of prison in the morning and in the afternoon be in someone's house uninsured, unlicensed.
that's amazing. But you know what? I bet that the cost to get someone who's good out to the property is a lot lower than it is here.
It is. It is. And it's it's interesting. It's probably one reason why it's costs less to live and operate in Texas than it does California. As far as a homeowner, right? I mean, the cost to build the house is less. Of course, the property cost is less to begin with, but to build a house would be less, and to maintain it would be less. Do you think it's better or worse to have such regulation in your category of handyman? In other words, do you think California's a little too tight, and also at the same time, do you think Texas is way too loose?
I think that I would not be where I am today if I didn't do some things I shouldn't have done by the letter of the law. I think more regulation is always bad, and I don't think that something like a handyman should have the type of insurance and workers' comp requirements, and the amount of money that we pay just to keep our doors open is insane, and it's unfortunate because we pass that on to the consumer. We have to, otherwise we wouldn't be in business. So I really think that more places would benefit from less regulation. And it's not surprising why so many contractors in California just don't make it, past year 2, year 3, because of how hard it is to be in business.
Hmm. No, absolutely. All right, we're going to dig in a little bit into you, Greg. Who were you when you were a 10-year-old kid?
I was I loved to play sports. I wasn't super into school, but I did okay. I never, like, being in the trades was never like even on the radar, not even close. I think at that point in time, I still thought I could be a professional basketball player. But yeah. It
Very
was,
nice.
I grew up in like a suburban environment. So it was, I was like thinking, oh, I go to school and then figure it out, which is kind of what I did. But I didn't really figure it out, but I did go to school. So there's that.
Who was your biggest influence growing up? Who molded you?
You know, I was molded in like a church environment,
Hmm.
so I would say like traditional like biblical standards. There's not one person in particular, like my mom and my dad were still together and around, so they obviously had an influence on me. I would pick up, tidbits from different people. I remember like my soccer coach growing up was like really, all about working hard, and I kind of took that from him. And then there's one guy I knew in Boy Scouts that told me I ate a candy bar one time. He's like, "Hey, you're gonna go work that off, right?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." So it kind of got the early bug to be like into fitness early on. So you kind of grab things from everybody.
Would you consider yourself a courageous person? I mean, you started your own business in a field you weren't familiar with.
I think courage was developed over time. Early on, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself courageous, but my threshold for taking risks increased basically in my early to mid 20s. I used to be an accountant, so I would just
Oh.
work these, a salary job, a nice safe salary job in a cubicle. And I saw some people that were serving tables and bartending, and they were, not having to take their job home with them and stuff. And I quit my accounting job. And it was then, I think, when my ability to support myself really depended on how hard I worked. That's when the courage bug kind of started.
How do you feel from going from a professional white collar industry, accounting, right,
Hmm.
over to a blue collar industry slash job? That's a that's a big departure because you were on a path, you were educated a certain way for accounting, white collar job, and now you're swinging a hammer. It's interesting.
Yeah, it it was kind of, I was a product of what society tells you to do, like
Yeah.
go to college. You're not a success unless you go to college. And I'll put this out there. I was a financial reporter, so I'm a poor man's accountant. I wasn't a CPA or anything. So I was responsible for weekly reporting of numbers. And I really despised that line of work because I didn't have anything to do with how much money was being spent. I was just telling people, but I hated how like every week I had to do inventory. And then because I worked for like a big catering company, and then afterwards, if they lost money, I would have to stay late on a Friday and tell them why they lost money. I was like, this is crap, dude. Like I shouldn't be, this is not my fault.
Yeah.
So I was ready to get out of there, and I was looking for anything that could get me out of that. So the serving tables, I worked at like a really nice steakhouse, and like it got me working with my hands, and I realized that was more my jam than sitting behind a desk all day. So
Mhm.
that kind of started the transition of like being moving around, interacting with people, not just like making spreadsheets.
Yeah. What's your biggest regret in your personal and or business life?
I would say going to college instead of working first. There's obviously some relationships and um like some skills that might have been developed, but looking at it from like a numbers perspective, big waste of money and time. I think I would have benefited more from working right out of high school and you know doing getting into it and like starting to earn money, then get the student loan debt that comes with it. And like the I wasn't a good student. Like my grades started out here and they steadily went down every semester. So I definitely, when I have children, they're gonna they'll get the full picture before they make the decision what they're gonna do after high school.
Children, is that something in the near future? Is that something you're planning on having
Yeah,
soon?
I just got married last January, so once it's never going to be a perfect time, but once the business gets to in about a year or so, I think we'd be in a good spot. So we'll start cranking out some kids.
Congratulations. You know that's going to be a very tough job. I've done it, so I can say that. Okay, so I've built businesses. I've been an employee, been married, still married, and for over 20 years raising children. And I'll tell you, the thing about kids is once you have a child, your responsibility changes. You will always be responsible for that minor child because the law says you will.
Hmm.
And then you generally always feel close to them for your entire life. And it's a big responsibility. I'll tell you, you've got a huge head start on many people, and you're probably thinking, well, I'm not 25, Jim. No, you're older, which means you have more experience. And as a man, I can tell you, I had my first child at 35. So the older you are as a man, the better you'll be equipped financially and experience. And that's really important when you're raising children. So,
Yeah, I don't think I would have been equipped to even have a cat, let alone a human baby in
yeah.
my early 20s. So I'm grateful I didn't get put in that position or put myself in that position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you're in good shape. Um, what has been your biggest win in your life?
That's a great question. I think my biggest win is being able to starting to depend on myself as opposed to like getting out of the rat race of like employed by a corporate entity. I think that's really against the grain of like everybody in my family. There's no business people in my family, and so just being able to do that and begin to thrive over time, especially from where I started in the business and where we're going. Uh, it's a tremendous achievement, I think.
Some of us are really good at certain things. Do you have a superpower?
I think my superpower is just understanding where people are at, and being aware of like situations. I guess I don't have. I can connect with people really easily, which really helped out early on when you're trying to bootstrap a construction business. But the that's really where I think we thrive. Like my Thumbtack profile was at 100 reviews, and I got all those by myself. Over two
Wow.
years.
Wow.
So it being able to like kind of like I don't know, is that empathize with people or
Hmm.
yeah, so
Yeah.
empathize with people and it helps provide better service too. And I think it comes off with our my coworkers also. They've started to take on those qualities.
You seem like a person who has gratitude. What are you most grateful for?
I'm just so grateful for the different learning lessons that God kind of puts in front of me and the way he develops us as people. I'm a Jesus guy, and just the different ways that you get taught, like just taught lessons like over time and like to set a tough situation, but like, I always feel like, I can lean into prayer and my like church family and it's just it gives you comfort, especially a construction business. Being a business person in general can be very tough, and so being able to just always have my like eyes on him and just know that whatever happens, like I'm still good. Like I'm it's not gonna go. It's all happening for a reason, and so it's awesome. It's a good feeling to wake up every day knowing that you're blessed.
That's awesome. You've told me that you like to self educate you go to conferences and so forth, including Tommy Mello's Home Service Freedom in your town, San Diego. Why do you think that's so important for someone in your position?
I think it's important because you really have to try and find an edge anywhere you can. And, a conference, it might be like 1,500 bucks for a ticket, but if you get one thing that you can implement in your business, it's well spent. Meet one person, and there's so many new things happening. So you really need to be on the front end of that. Offline we were talking about Marcus Sheridan
Mhm.
and how it's so important for people to understand price, and especially with my business being probably one of the more expensive handyman services that you in the city. You need to and I wouldn't have known that if I didn't go to the conference and hear his talk and be like, oh my gosh, this is what's really important, and could you need to lean into this aspect of things. So it's like a constant thing. Like another great one is the Waste No Day podcast, where they're like
Mhm.
constantly role playing, or like this podcast, you get to hear stories from people. You have to always be educating. If you're not growing, then you're, I don't want to say dying, but you know what I mean. It's like you need to be growing all the time. And so, there's no better investment than yourself.
Yep. I went to college. A lot of people I know never picked up a book or went to a conference or a seminar after they graduated. They were so happy throwing their cap in the air saying, I'm out of prison now. I've been spending, my entire childhood and early adulthood in education, formal education. Now I can just go get a job. And um, if you're an employee, you shouldn't do it. You can sometimes get away with things. Certainly, as a business owner, there's no way you're going to be successful if you keep the book closed. You have to constantly be studying, reading, networking, going to conferences. And I think you're a smart man for doing that. Very smart. I know you are because
Well, thank you.
because
But
you just have to do it.
I know one of my networking groups had a gentleman who left, and he had to close down his business because it was too hard for him. But I remember I told him about another conference I had gone to, and he said something to the effect of like, "Oh, everyone there is, it felt like a cult." And
Yeah.
and to me that sounded like i I don't have my eyes or ears open to hear like any new information that might challenge my thinking, and so it was kind of a good example of like why it's so important to stay, be open to things, and constantly be growing.
A lot of people close themselves off to things they don't believe in or understand. And it's really frustrating. In my business, for instance, I know what I offer to home service clients is very good. And my clients understand it and appreciate it. A lot of people just don't understand it. It's almost like a religion, I guess, right? Where we're a cult where people just don't get it.
Yeah.
And it's tough. Like when it comes to diet and exercise, most Americans apparently don't get it. Just look at the numbers, look at the people, they just don't get it. And I've been studying a lot on sleep and proper nutrition and lowering my stress and exercise. And sure enough, I'm in the best shape of my life with the handicap of my age by far.
Right.
I've never been in better shape considering my age. And you know what some people tell me? You are blessed with great genetics.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I work my butt off. And
Right.
this is the person who's fat sitting in the lazy boy stuff in their face with the KFC bucket. And I'm like, it's very frustrating, right? When you know the secret to success and other people want to debunk it or be negative. They're like, oh, that's a cult or that doesn't work. And I'm like, it's wild.
What I think I heard Tommy Mello say, he's like overnight success that took 20 years, or a 20-year overnight success. And
Yep.
that's totally how it is.
Oh yeah.
No one sees all the stuff, like you in the gym, or like,
Yep.
working till like 10 o'clock every night, 7 days a week to make your business successful. They don't see that. They just see, what happens at the very end of it. It is frustrating.
It is. It is. And it takes commitment. I was going to say hard work. It doesn't have to be hard. There's work. It doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be, applying principles and time. And you can achieve anything. You can be in good physical shape. You can become more educated. You can make more money, have better relationships. But generally, we're not born with this. We're animals that need to learn this. We're human. We don't just come out of the womb with, oh, I'm an entrepreneur making $6 million a year.
Yeah.
No, it's not that simple, is it?
No, it really isn't. But, it's also being okay with I don't, it's like a little lonely in some degree. Like, you have to say no to a lot of things to develop you have to really have that like long-term vision of like, okay, I'm going to not do these things now and do them later. And the people might not understand why I'm saying no to this hangout, or no to this friend group, or no to this event, or whatever. But, the payoff is in like 5 years. It's hard to tell that to, or, for people to really comprehend that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I I've written some books, and I have a lot of titles of books in my drawer in my office that I want to write about. And one of them I really want to write about is doing it over. So the title of the book would be Do Over. And what it's about is, if I were 25 years old today, this is what I would do over. So people ask if I have regrets. Not many. It doesn't do you much good to dwell on things. So no, they were all learning experiences. But boy, if I could go back with what I know today on how to be efficient and what not to do and what to do, by the time I got to this age again, I would be a totally different person. And it's so easy to say, right? It's the wise old man you go to in the village, and he says, "Son, this is what you should do." Of course, the kid never listens, right? I mean,
Right.
maybe half listens. But boy, if I go back, and I want to write that book for my children. My children are in their early 20s. And I think it would be a great book for anyone who's coming out of high school or college as well. A parent, to give them that book. Because all of us as parents, and you'll find also when you're a parent, you want to teach your children things, especially as you get older. You're like, oh my gosh, little Johnny, telling you, if you only knew this. And unfortunately, little minds, young minds, even minds in their 20s and 30s, don't listen. But it's frustrating when people just don't get it and you see it. So then you got to spend time with people who do see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's, dozens of things I would have done different, but it's where you are now, and you can only move forward. But definitely, I guess having children would be a good chance to see if I can't like nudge them into a different path or whatever. But I know what you mean. You can't look back and
Nope.
really regret it.
Can't have regrets. Greg, on that note, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on the program. How does that sound?
Sounds good, Jim. I appreciate you having me.